Kindly someone confirm that I can be heard.
Yes,
Yes,
we can hear you.
I can be heard. I can hear you loud and clear.
You can. Sorry.
I can hear you loud and clear. This is Rosemary from Kenya, Nairobi.
Thank you, Rosemary, for cheering me on. Okay, so good afternoon once again. And I would like to apologize for the lapse in opening up the meeting room. I hope we're able to pick up and make up on the lost time. So my name is Lydia, and I am the Human Resource Director at Cavendish University, Uganda. So this is part of the sessions of on learning and development or ongoing CPD sessions. And so we will be starting a session on series on ethical leadership. So I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar series. I recognize that we have external parties joining this conversation, and we're looking forward to having more of our staff on this webinar series. As a big background, ethical leadership lies at the heart of our mission as a university, and so would like to bring this to life through discussions and unearthing what are those ethical challenges. How can we voice out those ethical challenges? Can we speak firmly? And where do we want to, how do we want to measure ourselves on ethical leadership, considering that it is at the heart of our mission? So this afternoon, we have presenters, two presenters take us through in this conversation. And my colleague Bernard, who is also very passionate about this conversation, will give us a brief bio about our presenters this afternoon. But of course, we are honored to have our own executive director taking us through this conversation, talk about stewardship, right? He needs to hold the flag high. So he will take us through promoting the development of an ethical atmosphere at Cavendish University, not anywhere else, at Cavendish University, because this is the community that brings us together at this point in time. So thank you to everyone that has joined and everyone that joined in on time. And I would like to confirm whether, Bernard, are you on the call? Bernard, are you there?
Yes, I am on the call.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
without wasting a lot of time, I would like to invite you to give us a brief presentation, a brief introduction about our speakers this afternoon. Of course, not to emphasize the importance of ethical leadership and giving voice to values in our workspace as we work towards transforming our students into ethical leaders as educators and administrators in the higher education space. Thank you, and over to you, Bernard.
Thank you so much, Lydia, for introducing us to the reason why we are here. My name is Bernard Ochan, as was introduced by Lydia, and invite all of you to welcome with me our very first speaker to this conference. Our first speaker is the Executive Director of Cavendish University, Uganda. Sorry, yes. All right. Our first speaker is the Executive Director for Cavendish University, Uganda. He's a leader, he's an entrepreneur. He is the person responsible for leading the university's operational, financial, and administrative functions. He has over 20 years of experience in oil and gas, telecommunication, and food industry. He has served as a lecturer at 2 different universities. He has served on boards in education, healthcare, and telecommunication. Very importantly, he's passionate about the youth and in youth development, economic empowerment, education, issues of environment, health, poverty alleviation, science and technology. And at this institution, we look at him as an embodiment of ethics and leadership. And he has two very strong values in him, in everything he does: integrity and, very importantly, humility. He's a member of the Rotary Club of Kampala since 2001. And Mr. Mutabanura holds a master's degree in business administration, Master of Science in chemical engineering, and a Bachelor of Science in food science and technology. David, you're welcome to speak to us.
Thank you very much, Bernard, for that very kind introduction. I would like to thank you and the Cavendish University Uganda leadership team for entrusting me with this very big duty of presenting on such a big and important topic on developing an ethical environment. And so I'll concentrate on Cavendish University, but with the understanding that we have external guests and ethics cut across, as we will see down the line. Lydia, our HR director, thank you very much for kicking this off. And I also like to recognize our external guests, mainly within the Education Collaborative Initiative, our partners from across Africa, and most notably the person I'll be sharing today's platform with, Professor Lenny Bear from Ashesi University, a very distinguished professor, originator, and thinker. And we are looking very much forward to listening to you. And without going further, I hope you can see my screen.
Yeah, you can see your screen.
Okay. So I'll be talking about promoting the development of an ethical atmosphere, keeping in mind, of course, that at Cavendish University, we have for our vision a center of excellence, innovation, and transformation. And our mission is to transform and inspire students to reach their full potential in employment, entrepreneurship, and ethical leadership. That mission is so grand, I always feel challenged by it. And underpinning it is the three pillars of employment, entrepreneurship, and ethical leadership. So what I will be talking about in one way or form will touch on how we can, develop ethical leadership within our student community. But this also starts with ourselves as staff, as leaders, as management of the university or the universities in which we work for the external guests. At Cavendish University, Uganda, we have for our values: excellence, integrity, responsibility, respect, communication, passion, and innovation. And this screen shows you a bit of what we mean when we talk about excellence. When we talk about integrity, we are talking about honesty, transparency, and ethical conduct in our work. Zero tolerance for corruption. Responsibility, we are accountable for what we do, and we are committed to cooperate to good citizenship in the country, but also as a business, as a university that is offering services to our students. We're a university with nearly 50 nationalities, and that demands of us to be very respectful of each other, to work as a team, because we can go so much further together than singularly. And then, of course, we hope that we can promote a culture of open, honest, and clear written and oral communication in which we can listen intently so that others can speak to us, and speak so clearly that others can listen. And I hope I don't disappoint on this occasion. We want to drive passion in our work that can be very well palpably felt by our customers. and very importantly also to constantly innovate. So I thought to begin by talking about success, because at Cavendish we have a slogan. Our slogan is "Success begins at Cavendish," which is very true because many people's professional, social, and other careers have started right here at Cavendish University, Uganda, and they've gone on to achieve much success. A successful person is, of necessity, a competent person. You can't be incompetent and then you say you're successful. So I thought to provide a competence framework that talks about a successful person. And there is something called a triangle of success, on which the three sides have got, beginning with knowledge, then attitudes, and then skills. In fact, I always like to say that for anyone to be successful in this world, you need, have subject mastery of an area, a subject, which could be it could be law, for example. So you should have, if you are a lawyer or a law student, you should be able to articulate well and understand subjects such as jurisprudence, such as constitutional law, such as civil procedure or criminal procedure, such as law of torts, as an example. That is knowledge. It means you know the basics, the theories, the principles, and that is just one aspect. I normally also then say that your personal conduct comes next. Here we are talking about the attitudes. And in the tested triangle of success, some specific attitudes. And when I say attitudes, I mean your values, your principles, things you hold dear to yourself, which also relates to your mindset. Include things like being self-driven, being self-confident, being a person of integrity, which I described a short while ago, being an honest person, being somebody who is optimistic, enthusiastic, who works well in teams and is committed to the duty that has been entrusted to you. So personal conduct as the second aspect. I normally say the third aspect is actually networking, socialization skills. In this case, we are talking about some skills that have been identified. These are soft skills that have been identified as critical for success. So the one that jumps out most notably is interpersonal skills that I've just spoken about by way of networking. But in soft skills, you could go beyond that to include things like managing time, critical thinking or reasoning, communication, setting goals, which now relates to personal management or leadership, decision-making, among others. Now, you will notice that I have circled the aspect on attitudes because it can be so critical, your attitude or your personal conduct or behavior, that it can actually determine how well you will achieve any of the other two aspects of skills or knowledge. And ethics, as we will see shortly, is at the heart of attitudes. It's at the heart of personal conduct or behavior. When we talk about ethical people, these are people who are self-motivated. These are people of integrity, meaning they mean what they say and say what they mean. These are people who are honest. These are people who are enthusiastic, who are committed to the duties that have been entrusted to them. So, but I thought to also begin by giving an insight around ethics. When we talk about ethics, what do we mean? And I know that there are many definitions of ethics. So I chose to go back to my teacher at the Eastern and Southern African Management Institute. I actually learned something about him. He's called Geoffrey Kachali, and he is a former Deputy Auditor General of Malawi, the Republic of Malawi. He says that ethics is generally the interaction of three elements: yourself, the other person, and a common good. So ethics is about, thinking about yourself, your needs, your aspirations, your rights, responsibilities, but at the same time, thinking about the needs, aspirations, responsibilities, and rights of others. And when we talk about others, we also these days include the environment. So what is good for me should be good for the other. If that is the case, then I am ethical. If there is a gap, I'm doing something bad to myself, I'm doing something bad to the other, I'm doing something bad to the environment, that is not an ethical thing to do. In a very simple way, meaning to do what is good, what is right, and we interact as human beings with each other and with the environment. Very simple. When we talk about ethics, we talk about moral guidelines for good behavior, meaning doing what is morally right, what sounds okay to our conscience. And, God has created all of us with a conscience that can check us to see whether what we are doing is generally right or good or not. I know there is something about being legally accepted, and I'm not, the biggest expert in this area of ethics, but I also know for sure that not everything legal necessarily is ethical. And we have had in the course of history many tests to that balance. So therefore, we should always do what is right, what is good for ourselves, but also good for the others, good for the public, good for the environment. And there are some words that I chose to tease out there to just show us what ethics is all about. It's about good behavior, the kind of behavior, as I mentioned earlier on. It's about being socially responsible. As a university, to do things that, profit us as an institution, also profit our people. Do we pay our people well? But also profit our environment, our communities in which we operate. Of necessity, ethics comes with a high degree of transparency or a high degree of consistency, meaning repeating, what we do well, not just doing once and then giving up. It comes down to being people of integrity, to doing things well, exceptionally well, of quality, to being people of strong core values, to being reliable people, dependable people, to being people who are energized and enthusiastic and therefore committed, being people who are trustworthy, being people who follow the rules, because generally the rules have been made well for us and for others, and people who are honest. So I was told to talk about the development of an ethical atmosphere or an ethical climate. But what is an ethical climate then, since we have talked about ethics? An ethical environment is one where there are shared understandings across, the whole organization, from managers to employees, about what constitutes ethical behavior, but also what constitutes unethical behavior in the organization. An ethical climate is one that provides a clear moral atmosphere for the way we do our work and how we conduct our business. An ethical climate defines the norms and standards of what is acceptable to be applied consistently, clearly, and in a pervasive way, where everybody in the organization, from top to down, follow the same standard and are held to the same level of accountability on ethics, on what is right and what is wrong. An ethical climate is one in which the leaders embrace and enforce ethics, both in word but also in deed. It of necessity means we have to do modeling as leaders for the rest. And as we will see, leadership is very critical in driving an ethical environment. In summary, on this subject of ethical climate, it shows what our core values are, and I just highlighted our core values a few moments ago, including respect, communication, passion, innovation, integrity, and so on. But it also means that we are able to identify those core values in everything we do and how we run our business or how we run our university, but also how we are committed to those values. I remember telling my colleagues at Cavendish University, Uganda, that, you know, when I have a chance to do interviews, normally I will ask, even after somebody has been given a job, I'll just ask, our values are the following. Are these things that you would like to associate with, or do you find them to be repulsive? Because if they are repulsive, then I don't think, you know, you should take up the job immediately. Maybe you need to think about it. Otherwise, you will inconvenience us and we may inconvenience you down the line. So, you know, why not think about it and see how well you fit with those values? In a way, then, it helps us to manage deviance, whether before entry, but also later after entry. There are many ways of classifying ethical climates, from, you know, environments that are caring, that are rules-based, that follow the law and code of conduct, that are very kind, that promote independence. But we also see that the outcomes of an ethical climate include the way employees behave, the way employees are satisfied with their work, you know, the purpose that they find at their work, the way they are committed to the organization. One of the key outcomes of a good or ethical environment is the high customer service performance of the organization. It can also be felt in employee turnover, but also organizational citizenship. You remember that the role of universities is to promote or facilitate teaching and learning, as well as research, but as well community engagement. You know, the promotion of civilizations and good citizenship, both for the individuals in the university, but also, you know, for the organization as such. You know, do you pay your taxes, for example, because we know that taxes are used for public use. At the same time, an ethical climate also provides for, you know, dealing with the difficult issues. How do you handle people who deviate from the set culture? How do you deal with corruption? An ethical environment can be seen in how well people attend to their duties. So their timekeeping, for example, their absenteeism. If you have a university where people do not attend class and just continue, whether they be students or staff, that will be an outcome of the ethical climate that is sustaining in the university. There are benefits to an ethical environment. For employees, they will find well-being, whether it be physical, spiritual, financial, social, emotional. An environment that is ethical will mean less stress, for example. For the employee, they will find meaning, they will find success in their work, in their environment, and they will also be attracted to work and be retained in that environment. Then for the organization, an organization that has got a good ethical climate will have good reputation. It's well known out there, thanks to the observations of your customers, thanks to the observations and practice of your staff and how leaders are perceived. And you can attract partners, investors, collaborators. Those are signs of an ethical environment. And, in the long run, you will sustain value. You will create and sustain value for the organization. Value that relates, for example, enrollment, value that relates to the student outcomes. Are they employable? Are they enterprising? Are they ethical, in fact? But also it means that the organization can run its affairs using internally generated resources or those that are from partners that are willing to partner with the organization. So here, what are some of the things that can help us improve an ethical environment? Number one, we need to manage ethics at the point of recruitment. It means teasing out our values, the ethical values with the people that are joining the organization, just to be sure that they have the right fit for the ethical environment that we are trying to create. Number two, it comes down to creating massive awareness through communication in multiple means about what is at risk. What is at risk is the organization's reputation, for example. What is at risk from bad ethical practice could be lives. If people are doing the wrong things, cutting corners, what is at risk could be losing money and therefore impacting sustainability, etc. To develop an ethical environment requires transparency, especially in the area of finance, so as to avoid unethical financial practices. Developing an ethical environment means speaking truth to power, meaning providing an environment where employees feel free to speak when they see unethical behavior. And in the case of Cavendish University, Uganda, it is the reason why there are suggestion boxes. It's the reason why you have got, a generally open door policy across the board for students and for staff at all levels. It's also the reason why there are anonymous emails. It is the reason why, we have a code of conduct to check all of us, among others. And then also there is integrating ethics in culture, in the way we live. So for example, now that we are having this session, you know very well that at Cavendish on Wednesday afternoon, we have development sessions for our staff development sessions. So embedding ethics in that, embedding ethics in our curriculum, all these are ways in which we can develop an ethical culture. The kind of books that we read commonly at the university, from our sponsors to our management, to our staff, to our students, all those are ways of integrating culture, ethics in the organizational culture, but ultimately with a view of influencing an ethical orientation in whatever we do. mention earlier on that for us to improve the ethical climate, a lot depends on management, and we are all managers here, we are leaders. So the way we communicate should be effective, meaning by what we say, but also what we do. We should use multiple means of communication, you know, from emails to phone calls to visits to people's offices, to what we post on the WhatsApp group in our, I know we have WhatsApp groups for our faculties and departments, you know, how we drive ethics in those spaces. We can also do ethics audit. I know, for example, that every semester at Cavendish, we do a student satisfaction survey. The feedback that comes from those surveys, some of which touches on ethics, has enabled us to take action or to check ourselves in terms of what we claim to be and what we actually are, or what we are perceived to be. We've extended those surveys to include now our alumni, to include our staff, to include employers. So we hope that, you know, the whole subject or concept of ethics will be fleshed out through the surveys, or what we could call audits. But you could also have a specific ethics audit, which would check whether you have the, you know, best practice in code of conduct against peers, and then check the practice that we have at the institution, whether it is actually true or we are just making claims. Improving an ethical climate means that we should also undertake training in ethics, such as what we are having. Today we have a very, very huge chance to listen to, you know, Professor Lenny Bear, who is central to the development of the Giving Voice to Values initiative that has picked up across the world. That is ethics training. Improving ethical climate comes down to, you know, providing for whistleblower mechanisms, where people can, you know, without feeling that they will be victimized, report issues that of an ethical nature for action. But it also comes down to disciplining violators. And at Cavendish, I'm sure you are aware, we have had instances where we've had to discipline violators, caution, in certain instances, even expulsion, both students as well as staff. It comes down to having clear set codes of conduct. And I know that every staff joining Cavendish has got a code of conduct attached to their contract or engagement through the auspices of the HR office on the same. It comes down to, you know, being very ethical in the decisions that we make. For example, if you know you are conflicted in a situation, can you declare the conflict of interest? I noticed, for example, that in our university council meetings, one of the first things that we do is to declare a conflict of interest in the matters that are being discussed. This is just an example of including ethics in our decision-making processes. But it also comes down to being realistic. We are living in Uganda, in a country that, you know, has its fair share of challenge around ethics. So, you know, taking into consideration that background, how far can we expect ourselves, you know, to be very ethical? If we fall, we recognize we have fallen. Are we willing to improve, to pick up and move, to share our learnings? It also comes down to having, you know, ethical programs, ethics programs, as well as dedicated officers. I know, for example, our sponsor organization has got a chief compliance officer. who handles ultimately any matters or any disputes that relate to ethics. But there are also ethical designated officers within our environment to challenge everybody on the issue of ethics. So having these in place helps to improve ethical climate. And finally, just a few additional tips that I may not have mentioned earlier on for creating a more ethical workplace. I already talked about creating a code of conduct so that the expectations are well set. You know, you can't mark somebody on an exam on subjects that you didn't teach, isn't it? So it helps to set the expectations before you then, provide the code of conduct. Or you check somebody in or out against that code of conduct. Creating a more ethical workplace comes down to engaging with, various stakeholder communities, employees, for example, your clients, our parents and guardians, the communities around us, the regulators, for example. We've in recent weeks or years been engaging regulators on some of these aspects. But it also comes down to reinforcing the benefits of good ethical conduct. I mentioned earlier on that success has got three main facets: your subject mastery, but also good ethical practice, in addition to, soft skills, key of which is socialization skills, interpersonal relation skills. Creating a more ethical workplace means role modeling good ethics. It comes down to training, which I mentioned a few moments ago. It comes down to promoting ethics through awareness. It comes down to rewarding ethical behavior, by way of recognizing ethical practice or practitioners, promoting, to the next level possible those who are ethical, because that will drive organizational success. But also, it comes down to learning from our mistakes. When the mistakes are there, we review them. We understand what are the underlying issues that may have brought about the mistakes, all with the intention of improving the ethical environment. With that, dear listeners, dear staff, dear collaborators, dear guests, I would like to thank you for giving me this moment to talk to you and to hand over the microphone back to the moderators, Lydia and Bernard, to invite our keynote speaker for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mutapunra David, for speaking to our hearts and to our heads. Issues of ethics is just like a message in the Bible. You'll have to believe it in order to act upon them. So thank you for opening our hearts. Thank you for opening our hearts. And as we sit to listen to the visitors whom we have invited to speak to us, I would want to encourage every member who is in attendance to, if you have a question that you want to ask directly to the first speaker, please write your question on the chat room, and then we shall read the question from there. I want to take this chance now to invite our next speaker. Our next speaker is a professor of ethics. He's Professor Lenny Baird. His full name is Professor Leonard Baird. In this presentation, there will be two people speaking about the same topic. It is from this presentation that we shall understand at least 2 or 3 things, but also respond to 3 very basic and major questions, major ethical questions, which is 1, is what you or I doing legal? Is it fair and balanced? Then how will it look? How will it make you look or make you feel after you have done what it is that you want to do? On the topic, giving voice to values, and the topic that we specifically selected for Professor and Rosemary to act upon, we are going to be listening to a gentleman, to a father, to a programs director, to Professor Lenny. He's a professor of ethics and leadership. He has been in Assesha University for close to 10 years, and he has over 20 years of experience in teaching and education in the US, UK, now in Ghana. During his studies of his PhD, he developed a philosophy of teaching and learning. And this philosophy revolves around the partnership with the students, where his role is of a facilitator, meant to guide and nurture the exchange of ideas and pursuit of knowledge. He approaches each teaching experience with an ever-curious mindset, endeavoring to view each course as a lesson through the eye of a student. GVV resonates with Professor as he believes that it has the power to forge a very deep personal connection with the participants while fostering ethical leadership in a practical and very impactful manner. Professor, welcome to speak to this audience.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's great to see you. It's great to see everybody, well, to see everybody's names at least at Cavendish University. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
So as Bernard said, my name is Lenny Bear. I'm with Ashesi University. I'm in Ghana, and I'm going to be presenting along with Dr. Rosemary Nyale Kowor, and I have my fingers crossed that she's here. I understand they just had a power outage in Kenya, where she is. Rosemary?
I am
oh,
back.
fantastic. Okay, that's great. So we're going to be talking with you about initiating giving voice to values for educators. We'll be giving you some of our own experience to help you so that when you are initiating giving voice to value, you can learn from some of our experiences. Before we go on, Aram, can you share our slides?
Yes,
Aram,
I can share the slides.
Or I can share my end, whichever you think would be better.
Sure, that's fine too. You can share on your end.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Oh, Aram's got it. Okay, great. Okay, so let's go to the next slide now. Yes. So what we're going to do is we'll start by talking about what GVV Africa is about. And then I'll discuss what my role is in GVV, or Giving Voice to Values Africa, and then insights from my experience. And Dr. Rosemary will come in and talk about her role with GVV and insights from her experience. So that's a general outline of the presentation today. And before we go further, let me give you some background about giving voice to values. I understand people already have some familiarity with it, and I was fortunate to speak to Cavendish about a year ago and introduce ideas on GVV. But some background may also be helpful here, because when we're talking about giving voice to values. Let's go to the next slide, please, Aaron. When we're talking about giving voice to values, we are looking at decision-making in values conflict situations. So if you feel that your values are in conflict with something that is happening, what do you do? Do you speak up? Do you stay quiet? What if you observe corruption, cheating, lying? Do you take action? What do you do? Let's, to give you an example, a friend cheats on an exam after missing a lot of the semester due to illness. What does a student do when they observe that? If there's a person who is making up numbers on accounts and you see that, what do you do? It can be a very emotional time. It can be very challenging to find the right words to say or to not be overcome by your feelings in those situations. So it becomes really important to develop a mental muscle so that you rehearse how you might act in a situation in which your values are in conflict with what you are observing. So if you rehearse it, then the next time you face a values conflict situation, then you might be able to handle it better by drawing on that experience, that mental muscle that you have. Now, one of the things that I personally appreciate so much about giving values is that it is an empathetic approach. You need to be thinking through other people's explanations, their reasons and rationalizations. It could be that somebody is doing something that you feel is corrupt, but they probably have a way of explaining it and rationalizing it for themselves. So in my experience, and I've been living in Ghana now for about almost 16 years now, and I've had times early on where I would say, oh, I can't do that, or you shouldn't do that, that's corrupt. And every time I said that, I would get very strong pushback, and people would be arguing and confrontational. And I learned from that. If I want people to listen to me in a situation where I observe corruption, as an example of a values conflict situation, I need to choose my words wisely so that I'm more likely to be heard. Because if you choose a confrontational approach, people are more likely to close down, and then you're not going to get them to change their ways. So if you can think through how people might be reasoning through their actions, then you can think about how you might reframe it, how you might say, well, okay, this used to be a common approach, but is it still now? To be thinking through what is another way of framing or repositioning what they are saying so that you will more likely be heard. So let's go to the fourth slide now on the 3 A's of ethics education. This is really, really important when we are looking at giving voice to values. You'll see on the right side of the slide, ethical action. That is what we're looking at with giving voice to values, ethical action. In a GVV case, which I'll introduce that idea to you in a moment, but it begins with the idea that a protagonist is in a values conflict situation and they want to take action. What do they do? So we're looking at it from that standpoint, ethical action. There's so much else that's important in ethics as well. Is ethical awareness. How do we become aware of the ethical dimensions of situations and problems? There's ethical analysis, for example, bringing in ideas from Kantian ethics or utilitarianism or Ubuntu. But with GVV, giving voice to values, we are only starting from the standpoint of ethical action. We all have values. We all have ideas about what we feel is right and wrong. And when you make that decision that you want to speak up, what do you do? Now, it's also important to note that you do not need to have any special background in ethics to practice giving voice to values. My background for my PhD studied geographies of health, and I'm not really a professor of ethics. I'm a professor who teaches ethical leadership. So even with background, I find that I can teach this course and it can resonate so well with me and for you as well, regardless of what your background is. Everybody here can contribute to the idea of ethical action, giving voice to values. It's something that can connect with all of us, the ideas in giving voice to values. So let's go to the next slide now. This is a course, an online course in giving voice to values that is accessible to you. Some of you may have already taken this course. At the end of this talk, we're going to share with you a link so that you can take this course if you'd like. This is GVV Africa, and I was really pleased to be able to be one of the facilitators when this was first introduced earlier this year. This is an online, asynchronous, self-paced course, and it goes through different case studies. It also has videos showing leadership examples, people talking about their experiences with values conflict situations, and there are questions that people can explore through this. In addition to the asynchronous component, there is also a live facilitated session. In my case, the facilitated session was in person. In Dr. Rosemary's case, it was on Zoom. So we'll share with you some of our experiences from that. But first, let me go on to the next slide and tell you a little bit about my role. I have been teaching at Ashesi since, let's see, January 2018, so nearly 6 years. And I have taught GVV to students. And it's a course that, as I mentioned, really resonates strongly with me. But in addition to that, I've been an online facilitator with GVV Africa and an in-person facilitator, facilitating live sessions. In addition, I'm also a co-consultant in modifying this course, this GVV Africa course, so that it can connect specifically to university students. So we're working on that now, and that's a way of targeting this course so that it will be especially beneficial for students. So let's go on to the next slide. And I want to tell you a little bit about my experience with facilitating an in-person session. In this session, which was with a group, if I recall, it's about 10 to 12 people, and the name of the organization, it used to be Women Changemakers. I think they're now called Empowered to Educate. And what we were doing was rehearsing giving voice to values through a GVV case. And again, I'll say in a moment a little bit about what a GVV case is. There is an ethical conflict, and people have to think through what it is they want to say, what it is they want to do, who do they speak to, how do they act. So we rehearse giving voice to values for a case study, and the participants also reflect on their future role as a facilitator. As some of you may want to be facilitators, then this could be very useful for you too, to be thinking about what's the experience like? What are some questions that I can ask so that when it's my turn to lead, then I can do that well. So that's something that can also be addressed as part of the training. And role plays and peer feedback are a highlight of the training. And I really want to emphasize peer feedback rather than my feedback, telling people this is how you need to answer these questions. Rather, it's students learning from one another. And frankly, as a teacher, I'm always enjoying when I'm learning from students. That's the best part. So let's go on to the next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit about GVV case studies. So in a GVV case study, we're asking the participants to put themselves in the shoes of the protagonist. And you will see at the end of every GVV case study that you might read, questions that are similar to this. Assuming I did want to act on my values in this situation, what could I do? To whom could I speak? What might I say? So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're prioritizing ethical action. So there might be a situation in which one person would want to give voice to values, and another person, it might not be a values conflict situation for them. But for that person that is experiencing a values conflict situation, what would they do? And that's what comes out in these case studies. And they can be really complex and challenging. In teaching giving voice to values to students, I've noticed that the case studies that we use can vary from year to year. It could include police bribery. It could be about medical doctors withholding care during a strike action. It could be about a student being asked to inflate prices during an internship, a student discovering that a close friend is cheating, or there's an individual who has a friend in an abusive relationship. So there's so many different possible case studies. And they can be really challenging because if you take one action, it can hurt somebody or it can have a negative repercussion. Somebody might lose their job. Somebody might be physically hurt. So what do you do in these values conflict situations? How do you speak up? How do you give voice to values? Once you have decided that you want to take action, what is it? What are the steps that you take? So this is very challenging for people to think through. Let's go to the next slide now. I want to show you an excerpt from the training that we did with the group. And it's not really important, the details that are on this slide, because you haven't seen the case study, which is called Doing Bad to Do Good. But what I want you to just see is we're giving people instructions, and we're giving people a set time period for that. So people are thinking about an action plan for a protagonist, and they take 20 minutes to explore that. Before this, they've also done some reflection on the case, and they are to develop a 5-minute script around the action plan. And everybody in the group needs to be a character in the script. That's one of the things that's really exciting about giving voice to values case studies, is that there are multiple characters in it. So you need to think through different people's voices, different people's thoughts about what's happening, how they might explain things, how they might be able to see a possible resolution. So this is very challenging for people, developing a 5-minute script. But let's go on to the next slide so I can tell you a little more about this role play. So it's also important, before the participants do the role play, that we show them the question that we're going to ask them ahead of time. They need to see this. They need to know that these are the questions that they should be thinking about or observing other groups' role plays. So what was good about their action plan? So you see the role play, what worked well? But also, if there were to be a similar situation, how could that action plan be improved next time? And so what we do is each group does a role play, we give feedback, and then after that feedback, after both groups or however many groups there are have done this, then we compare. What is different? What's similar in the different approaches? And you can get really insightful, useful ideas to see the different approaches that people might use in these values conflict situations. So let's go on to the next slide now. And I want to tell you a little bit about key insights from leading training in giving voice to values. And a lot of these ideas that I'm sharing here actually were used in a training video that Rebecca Ewa put together, and we can share that with you if you're interested. And it is about how you it's about facilitating a GVV training session, and it has excerpts from the case study that I facilitated. And one of the key ideas to emphasize here is to set clear goals. Be very clear and upfront at the start. Let everybody know why you're doing this. because you obviously want everybody on the same page, and this is something that is deeply important also just in teaching. So set the clear goals. Perhaps it's that you want people to have the opportunity to rehearse a giving voice to values case, or perhaps you want people to learn how to become facilitators. So set those goals very clear and share with people at the outset, and provide positive reinforcement. These cases are complicated, and it's not something where we can easily say this group was right, this group was wrong. It's really important to really give people the time to think through these cases and to just be open to a wide range of ideas. As a teacher, I always enjoy giving students time to reflect. Give them that chance. If you present a new case for them, you could say, take a few minutes and write down your thoughts about these questions. Give them that opportunity to think through things on their own. And then you can also do an activity like asking them to talk with the person next to them. And as a teacher, I've always found that makes the discussion so much livelier. It increases the opportunity that you're going to get some innovative ideas, and some people who otherwise might not speak will be more likely to speak. And there are innovative approaches that you could bring as well. If you would like, people could share ideas or reflect on ideas using Padlet or other software, and then come together and share the ideas that they have. I would also emphasize that it's important to share the case study ahead of time. Give people the opportunity to read it. Each case study has questions that they can have them reflect through that ahead of time. But at the same time, when it comes for the training session, go over it with participants. In the session that I led on doing bad to do good, the case study was 1 page long. So we could do that. We could take time to read through it together. A lot of these case studies are 2 pages long. You can do that. You just take the time to read through it so that you just make sure it's fresh in everybody's minds. So let's go on now to the next slide. Now, I've been talking about providing clear instructions, and I put up a slide earlier about what those instructions are on giving feedback before the role play. I just want to emphasize that's really important to do so that you can get really insightful ideas from everyone. And it's also important to emphasize the need to prioritize peer feedback after each role play. So if you are facilitating a GVV training session, one of the most important things that you can do is be quiet and listen and learn. You still do need to come in later, but it's deeply important that you give everybody there the space to really think through the case, to evaluate the different ideas that they thought worked well or that could be improved, or the suggestions that they have for the role play. So it's so valuable in my experience, learning from students. And if you were to come in and say, this is what you should do, or this is what was wrong right at the start, then that would be a serious problem in keeping people from being able to share their ideas. I also would not want to say to people, this is wrong, because we don't want to be judgmental. We want all of the students to have the opportunity to provide non-judgmental feedback in a supportive environment where people are genuinely learning and listening to one another. Now, one of the important ideas that we need to emphasize in a GVV case study is that we need pushback for the protagonist. Very often when I've been teaching GVV to undergraduate students, they will come up with a solution that seems perhaps a bit too easy, and they'll present it. Well, perhaps somebody is cheating on an exam and they say, oh, I'm just going to talk to them and they're going to agree we need to do X. But actually, in reality, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be some tension there where it's going to take real effort for your ideas to resonate. So what kind of pushback would you expect the protagonist to face? What should be done in that case? So rather than trying to reduce the complexity to something that is quite black and white, allow that complexity to come out. Allow people to think through, but if I take this action, then this might happen. If I take this action, then that might happen. That's part of the value of thinking through a giving voice to values case study, so that people can really learn and fully reflect on what to do in those values conflict situations. And also to emphasize that people have different ways of explaining their actions. People can justify unethical actions to themselves and to others. So what are their explanations? Once we think through empathetically how other people might be explaining the justification for their action, their reasons and rationalizations, how might you reframe that so that people would be more likely to listen to you? And what I have found in teaching giving voice to values, despite all of the effort to help everybody learn, is that I am perhaps the one who learns the most, because the students can be the best teachers. And it is always so insightful to hear the contributions that people have. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Rosemary to continue with the presentation.
Thank you so much, Lenny, for laying that good foundation for us. I really, really appreciate. So here I am, Rosemary Nyawale is my full name. I teach at Daystar University School of Communication. So on my part, because my colleague Lenny has really laid a good and firm foundation, I'll try as much as possible not to repeat what he has already addressed. So I'll zero into three things. One, as an old student, I consider myself an alumna because I've done the e-learning course, the online course. And then I've also participated as an online facilitator for the same course. And then now I've become a championess, or let's say an advocate. So I will try to relate whatever I'm talking to, these key things. So one of the things is, as an old student or an alumna, I completed the GVV online course and I have a certificate. So based on my experience as a learner, GVV helped me find myself. I repeat that. It helped me find myself. Ariam, you can take us to the next slide. And what exactly do I mean when I say that? For a very long time, I was this kind of a person that when I would find myself in a conflicting situation, instead of voicing, I would simply pull out. I would just pull out. Even if it's a very important position I'm holding, I'll simply say, I'm taking that position. You know, I'm a lecturer, so I would say, you see, yes, sometimes you can be given positions like maybe you're the HOD or something. And then the moment I realized, no, this one, instead of speaking out, I would simply just pull out. But now when I did this course, I found myself, I repeat that, because especially the reflective writing, you know, gives an opportunity. In fact, I'm doing this so that in case you haven't done those, do it. It's very important, because the reflective writing, you know, it helped me to reflect on my intentions. I found myself asking, like this particular time, I decided to pull out. When I pulled out, I never solved the problem, because definitely somebody else found themselves in the same scenario I was in, that had decided to pull out. So I never solved the problem. So the reflective writing helped me as an individual to reflect on my intentions. And I realized that whatever I was doing was not the best way. And then that led me now to learning how to give my values voice, because I was now able to focus on aligning my values with how I view myself. My colleague has already talked about, because that's one thing I discovered when I was a student, that I did not understand initially what exactly GVV is. And more often we confused it with just analyzing ethics. But then I realized that it's first of all, it starts you as an individual. I have my values. So when I find myself in a conflicting situation, before I could say anything, definitely it's important I do a reflection, reflect on my intention. Once that is done, then it becomes possible now to give the values a voice, because you understand what exactly you are talking about. So I would say that now, as an old student or an alumna, going through this course, online course, enabled me to speak and act on my values. And the other thing that's quite important to me is the self-knowledge that I gained. Because self-knowledge, it has provided, an insight into my voice or my approach to standing up for personal values. It has put me in touch with my appropriate framework and what I need to do. So I would encourage us that if you haven't gone through this experience, it is worth it. The other thing, the learning resources. I was really good at downloading them so that I could read them even when I'm not online. And this really has worked in deepening my knowledge with regard to matters GVV and how important it is. Then the other thing that was quite also important as far as this course is concerned is interaction with seasoned facilitators. I am trying to avoid repeating what my colleague has already talked about, so I'll try and zero in what he did not mention. We have facilitators, and I think the approach that Aseshi has used that I really I'm quite proud of is, first of all, before you become a facilitator, you have to be a student. And the process of being a student, that definitely helps one to really understand the content of what you're talking about. So providing an opportunity to interact with seasoned facilitators and being able to check, learn from them, responding, providing timely feedback and all that. And besides the seasoned facilitators, the discussion forums, when we have those cases, then, colleagues we are participating with, because as I can remember, we were having people drawn from diverse backgrounds. And when I would go through what they posted, how they handle situations, that widened my scope of thinking. Many things that I learned, just as my colleague said, I became, you end up, even the students become now even the teachers, because based on what the colleagues have posted, sometimes something that you realize you've been struggling or struggling, I get to understand how one of them managed to tackle and how they went about it very successfully. So that's quite important to me. And then now, as online facilitator, one of the requirements was you definitely have to be familiar with GVV Africa post content for you to be able to facilitate. And that took me out of being a facilitator for this course took me out of my comfort zone in many, many, many ways. I had to do my own research regarding GVV. I came across lots of work done by Mary Gentile, and that it became, very clear to me exactly what the underlying concepts, the assumptions of the GVV approach, what it's all about. And so that really added immense value to me. The experience took me also out of my comfort zone. Let me take it this way. As a facilitator, I had to keep checking what the participants have posted, and then think critically and respond. And just as my colleague had said, it's not a matter of telling them what they should do, but guiding them so that they get a solution for themselves. So I'll give an example that I really love because it threw me out of my comfort zone. Every day I made an effort of that. When I'm done with my normal duties daytime, when I go back home in the evening, I check what has been posted so that I respond. And one day there, I come across a response that is from a student who has posted in French. I don't know French. So I thought, I said, what do I do? Okay. Then very fast I thought, yeah, I can get what he has posted and then get a translation. So very fast I did that. I got a translation in English, and then I got to understand what he was talking about. Then I responded in English. And after responding in English, I again got translation from English to French, and I posted back. I don't know if up to date the student realized, the participant realized, because he was very active. And we kept having, active conversations. He would post, I do the same process again. I get what is posted, get its translation, write my feedback in English, get translation back to French, post back. And we had very, very interesting discussions. So the experience, I repeat, that took me out of my comfort zone. I ended up, being able to communicate with this student who was not doing the postings in English. Maybe if you get to do that course, then you could get, because you're still able to get access to what was done previously. Those who understand French maybe would be able to tell me whether I got it right or not, but somehow I still managed to communicate because we were communicating. The facilitating the GVV case discussions and role plays, very important. Why do I say so? To me, as an individual, as I did this, I saw myself in many of these role plays. I saw the changes I'd faced, even as an educationist, some point I've also been engaged in administration. And it was like, yes, if this person faced this, and this is how they managed to go about it, then I can also be able to soldier on with respect without hurting anyone. And then that part of online facilitation, supplementing GVV Africa course content with the activities and discussions that draw on participants' own context and experiences with conflicts. So this particular aspect is also equally very, very important, because when we talk of matters ethics and being in conflicting situations, this is normally, situation specific. Sometimes what I may face, how I would handle it, be totally different from somebody who is based in Uganda. So understanding, participants' own context and their experiences, and this only happens when we create time to listen to them. Then offering encouragement and thoughtful feedback in the online discussion boards. Doing it in such a way that the participants are motivated to respond. You're not making it that forms the end of the discussion, but they are encouraged to be able to continue with the discussion. So that's it, what I did from as an online facilitator. And based on all those experiences, now experience as a student and experience as an online facilitator, you can guess that now I've really become a GVB Africa championess and advocate. I now have the courage to risk failure. Why? Because I know that such are lessons to learn from. So I'm no longer, scared. If just to try to quote Gentile, she recommends that readers, view opinions and preferences from supervisors, not as orders, but as suggestions. That's just a direct quote. And I now try to put into practice the pedagogical techniques. They now help me build, I try to build this even in my learner assessments, even when I'm handling my students in class. So it's like GV has just become me. And not just in my classes, even back at home. I mean, just creating time also to listen to people, you know, not that this is the way I see it and the way I see it is the way, but there's the way this other person sees it. And the only way I can be able to see the way that the person sees it is when I give a chance also to speak out what they need to talk about. And in the process, I may risk failure, you know, as a lecturer. You know, sometimes you walk in the classroom with the normal attitude. But now, with this kind of mindset, you know that even that student has something to say. And whatever he has to say is going to add value to the process. The other thing that I have gained that has made me a championess and an advocate, you know, when you are a championess or you're an advocate, you use an event to gain greater self-knowledge as well as feedback on physical improvement. So everything that happens, if I would use the example when I was the facilitator, the online facilitator, every time I would read what the participants have posted, you know, I would end up gaining even more knowledge from them. When I try to figure out how to provide feedback, in the process, I end up being the person even getting more improved. So I have learned a great deal from that. And then the other aspect is, you know, being a GVV Africa championess. I have I have found myself now, I have trained my thought processes as well as my body to produce a total approach to performance. Every time, like now today, I have to do this from on campus because I had a class in the morning, and then now the power blackout, and it took a while before we got to the power bar. But, you know, my thought processes, you know, a lot went through my mind. You know, suppose time for me will come, I'm supposed to talk, and this is not yet fixed. And in the process, you know, I tried even to reach out, what can we do? What is the best way forward and everything else. And finally, it's just worked out. Championing and advocating, you know, when you're advocating for something, you're pleading in favor of it, in favor for GVV. And as I do that, I want to encourage those of us who could be here today and you have not done this because I'm repeating, please, it is quite important. I would encourage to do that because it's for your own good. By any means, we must provide opportunities. Those of us who are educationists, we provide opportunities for students to do the right thing. It is increasingly important that they stand up for academic integrity on our campus. So it is on us to help them get involved and develop a strong support network. But how would that be possible if we don't understand what it means to do that and how to go about it? So generally, as I come to a close, key insights, you know, that I have gathered from GVV so far. I've been actively participating both the convening in Ghana, also the regional convening in East Africa. And I think I really appreciate the work that the university did in organizing this and also bringing us here. Cavendish, congratulations for that. And insights I've gathered so far. GVV is not about persuading people to be more ethical. Why? GVV starts from the premise that most of us already want to act on our values. But where is the problem? The problem is that we also want to feel that we have a reasonable chance of doing so effectively and successfully. Because sometimes there's that fear of I might end up, you know, hurting someone in the process. But now GVV guides us on how we can be able to voice our values without hurting anyone or minimizing any harm. Also, GVV empowers individuals with the skills to voice and act on their values, just as I've already said. Because yes, I'm not comfortable. I found myself in this conflict situation. I need to talk. but I don't know how to talk. I fear talking. I'm a tender parting someone. But now people want to be able to bring their whole selves to work, to school, wherever it is that they are, in an environment where they feel they can speak up safely and voice their values. So that can only be possible if the individuals are empowered with the skills to be able to do that and act on their values. The other thing I would say that I've gathered is that people faced with an ethical choice often know what the right thing to do is, but the problem is that they don't know how to do it. And so because they don't know how to do it, more often than not, we just keep quiet. We just keep quiet and do nothing. Either maybe if it was a position you were given, you decline for taking up that position and you just stay put and do nothing because you feel like if I get into this position, I'm going to have my ethical values compromised. So GVV provides tools to practice saying what we think needs to be done, but doing so in a diplomatic way that is comfortable and will be heard in the process of doing that. So I would encourage, you see, if an organization is seen as a safe place for speaking up, what is likely to happen? People's morale will fall. And when people's morale fall, productivity suffers. What is likely to happen? Undesirable turnover tends to occur because if now people will start looking for other places to move to. But when we provide an environment where they can be able to speak without feeling threatened, then they will be able to thrive. So from my end, that's it. I will stop there so that we can move on to the session of Q&A. And again, reminding those who yet to do the GPV online course is worth your time and worth your effort. Thank you. That's from me, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. If I could come in and just say one brief thing, and that is if you're interested, if people here are interested in taking GVV Africa, then please do, register for it. Hiram is going to put the link in the chat. We're also developing GVV Africa for university students. And if you have a case or an experience with a values conflict situation that you think might resonate with students, or if you think that students that you know might have a values conflict situation that they might share, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear more insights, more experiences on values conflict situations that we might use in modifying GVV Africa for university students. And there's a form in the chat that you can use. You can also send an email. You can fill out the form to sign up for the course. You can send an email to if you want to send an idea on a values situation. So thank you all once again.
Thank you, Professor Lenny and Rosemary. Rosemary is a senior lecturer at Dexter University. She's films and media production in the films and media production department. She's a researcher, curriculum developer, monitoring and evaluation specialist, and e-learning designer, and many other things. We have heard from her. And I want to thank the two of you for helping us understand the meaning of GVV, giving voice to value. As a university, we have values of excellence, integrity, responsibility, respect, communication, passion, and innovation. I think what we are going to learn, what we have learned from today is we need to give these values some voices, and then we need to speak and act on such values. I want to say again, thank you so much for facilitating, and I would want to encourage you to read this, to read the chat. There's some questions that have been directed to you so that you could respond to them. And I would also want to, before I invite other people to ask questions, I would want Mr. Mutabanora to respond to some of the questions that have been sent directly to him right now. Thank you. As Rosemary and Professor Lenny also read their own sections. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Bernard. And thank you very much, Professor Lenny, Dr. Rosemary, for the presentation on giving voice to values. It's always a learning experience, you know, listening to another person presenting about GVV and the compelling case why we should all undertake that course. The questions that have been put to me, very interesting. The first question that came across is from Dr. Oli. So she's saying that one of the ways of integrating ethics in corporate organizations is ensuring that new employees share the same ethical values. Please suggest ways of knowing that someone at interview holds the same ethical values, given that people may merely posture. I want to begin with the position that has been shared in part by Rosemary, that I think it's good to look progressively at the question of ethics, in the sense that everybody knows what the right thing is. Everybody knows what is good, you could assume. But then how do we help them to do that right thing? So in a way, Dr. Olive, looking at the gate of recruitment as an opportunity to share your own corporate values and challenge people, you know, potential staff, to check themselves as to if they can fit those values, if they desire, you know, if they aspire for those values, I think is progressive enough. But some things that somebody could actually do is to do background and reference checks. I've had a situation where somebody had forged 5 degrees that they claimed they had for their qualifications. Of course, by just doing that background and reference background check on their qualifications was sufficient to kind of determine that perhaps that person may not have been a very great fit for the kind of organization that they were seeking to join. But also at the point of recruitment, it could be to use questions that test people's motivations. And this could be, for example, through open-ended questions, questions that seek out the emotional rather than just logical or intellectual or soft skills. Because like I mentioned earlier on, the competency of a person goes beyond just subject mastery. It also goes beyond just the soft skills. Somebody who could speak so well, who is seemingly very sociable, but it also goes into the attitudinal aspects, which I think need to be then teased out. And maybe Lydia could assist in that. Sometimes I tease some of these things through asking questions that test, you know, achievements, whether professional or private or non-professional, social, for example. Those kind of questions I find that they are able to surface the values of a person. But maybe my colleagues on the panel, as well as the specialists in this in ethics could provide additional responses or contexts. Then there was a question from Professor Musa Dahiru on whether legally approved issues, ethically approved issues are ethical. Ethically approved, whether legally approved issues are ethical. Otherwise, how do we separate the two? I think I started earlier on by saying that, in a very base way, ethics is about understanding what is good for me, also as good for the other. It then follows that not all things that are legal necessarily are good for me as they are good for the other. And there are some very subtle issues that test that borderline. For example, animal welfare. I was visiting a European friend of mine some weeks back, and she indicated to me she had very nice dogs. They have very nice dogs. She indicated to me that she wouldn't give out her puppies to somebody who she thought was going to use the dogs for guard work. Yeah, that it could only be if it was, she could only give it a puppy if it was for a pet, yeah, for care. So the question is, where is the ethics there? Like there's a bit of a borderline. It could come down to what is ethical about, for example, animal welfare. What is legal about animal welfare and not. Environmental issues tend to tease this area, this borderline, because, for example, you are aware that in Uganda, until recently, there was no law on sand mining. Sand was not categorized anywhere as a mineral, and therefore it wasn't regulated. But as we now face very imminent challenges around the environment, the way we mine sand can have implication on water, water boundaries, causing flooding, for example, it is thought, and so on, and affecting marine life, etc. So if one is aware of that, would you still go ahead with indiscriminate sand mining? I think there is a question then around the legal as well as the ethical. Because remember, we said what is good should be good for self, should be good for the other, should be good for the environment. I like the fact that you raised a case of, saving corrupt or stolen funds in Europe taken Africa. That is another case of corporate tax avoidance. I think corporate tax avoidance is another area that tests the borderline of ethics and the law. Yeah, so a good example there, which speaks to the point I have just been raising. But it could also come to things like strict liability offenses that involve traffic offenses, for example, use of drugs. If you know that, for example, there is no law. You remember in the past in Uganda, there was no law around that forbade drink driving, I think. So, would you say that I can drink anything I want because there is no law that forbids that, yet you know that it could be bad for yourself, for your health, for your family, but it could also be bad for other road users? So again, just sort of trying to explain how, whereas the law is generally an enabler for ethical practice, sometimes it can also have its own hindrance. And ultimately, ethics is not about the law, it is about the good, what is right. Then there was a question from Fred Mufta, our sales and marketing director, asking that in the context of a rapidly evolving business landscape, especially in education, brought about by changes in technology that are affecting ethics, with the teaching and learning framework, what strategies would an organization like our university, CUU, adopt to stay in line with these changes while maintaining its standardized values fiber? Are there challenges to navigate in order to maintain set ethical standards? Yes, I think that is a very great question, Fred, that you asked. You know, the emergence of technology has brought great benefits of speed and efficiency and productivity, but also risks. For example, now somebody could go and plagiarize at speeds never known before. In the past, for somebody to plagiarize 30 years ago, they would have to go to a library and start shuffling pages. But now at a click, in 10 seconds, you could have an opportunity to plagiarize. I guess one of the strategies is for institutions to be ahead of these changes in terms of adopting quick countermeasures using technology, for example, using anti-plagiarism software, for example, and other tools that are available, for example, to check exam cheating or things of that kind. But it could also come down to, you know, ethics training, effective communication. As I had mentioned earlier on, it could come down to strategies around modeling ethical practice. It would come down to setting clear goals. I think this was kind of mentioned by Professor Lenny and Rosemary, that when you have a clear goal, then you can know, you know, what you are desiring to do. But also another strategy is empathizing with the needs, you know, and rights of the others, even as we expect people to understand our own. I think that is an important strategy that the GVV approach actually engenders. The other strategy is to look at the potential benefits. For example, the employability of our graduates if we pursue an ethical direction. Following that will be trust in our brand, but also for our employees. For example, as I mentioned earlier on, it would accrue benefits of, you know, generally well-being. People are not stressed. People are emotionally integral. Our staff can see themselves succeeding in their purpose in life, but also be retained or seek to work with, you know, our university or other universities where these standards are encouraged. There are challenges, as you have mentioned, the challenge of being misunderstood. There is the challenge of potential loss of business. You know, if somebody says, at that university, at that organization, we don't encourage cheating, you may lose some customers, some students who would like to go through, you know, to achieve their results through an ethical means. So there's that bit of a challenge. I think on the flip side, you could actually gain those students or partners who see you as doing the right thing. They could wish to partner with you, to join you, to use your services, and especially if they know that down the line, in terms of sustainability or long-term value, they will gain in the long run, not going short-term solutions. And finally, Professor Musa Dairo again raises the question of relativity on some of these matters. You know, for example, he mentioned issues around gender, economic, and freedom, economic matters and freedom. You know, how we make money. Do we make money regardless? How about freedoms? What kind of freedoms are enjoyed? Can we say ethics or values are relative? I think in a certain sense, yes. Determined by the culture in which people have been brought up. You know, what be generally accepted in Uganda, as somebody mentioned, might not be generally accepted in Kenya. And there are a few of those, again, I must say, there are a few of those that test the borderline. Yeah, so, but, you know, how do we go around that? I think we go around that by, you know, empathy in terms of, first of all, understanding whether it infringes on your rights. If it does, then chances are that it is not ethical. If it infringes on your rights, chances are that it is not ethical. How does it impact other people's rights? Because you remember, the good must be able to be served to yourself, but also to the other. So it's this whole thing of, you know, common good. Does it serve me, but also does it serve the other? I think, you know, through that kind of interrogation, we are able to say, okay, this is generally an ethical line to take, and not. Back to you, Bernard. That's what I could say, but I'm happy for, you know, my fellow experts on today's panel to you know, weigh in on those, even though I see they also have questions of their own. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So yes, I will leave it to the other panelists to also respond to some of the questions as they come your way.
Hello, everybody. Hello once again. Thank you. I wanted to take this opportunity to also address some of these questions. Let me just pull up these questions quickly so that I'll have them in front of me. Let's see. So there was a question about, I don't know if this question was meant for us or not, but the one that was based on the contemporary world issues revolving around gender, economics, and freedom, can we say ethics or values are relative terms? Now, if you look at this slide that we're displaying now, you'll see that our focus is on ethical action. And we can have all these wonderful conversations in ethical analysis about whether the terms are relative. But with GVV, we're focused specifically on ethical action. So again, this is a good conversation to be had, but what we're looking at is if somebody wants to give voice to their values, how should they do it? To whom should they speak? What should they say? So our starting point is that people have already decided that they want to speak up. They want to give voice to values. So all this other really rich information around ethical analysis, that is not part of what we're doing in GVV. It's still important, but it's different from what our focus is with GVV. Now, the case example on cheating in an exam, the question here is, what does GVV prescribe? So there is no prescription in GVV. We're not telling you what you need to do. And that's all the more reason why we need people, the participants, to be sharing their different approaches, to be analyzing, what if the protagonist does this? What if they do that? What how might that work? What might be the advantages and disadvantages of these different approaches? So there is no prescription. And then there's a question here about, can we say that their justification determines the nature of our evaluation? Is this not relativistic? Again, we're getting into issues of ethical analysis, which is very important, but GVV is something that is very much applied to real life settings. And we're thinking about what should a person do if they are presented with a values conflict situation? What is the best approach for that? So all of these ideas on ethical analysis, they're very important. But for me, in being asked these questions, they present a useful opportunity to emphasize our approach, which is on ethical action, where our starting point is that the protagonist has decided that they want to do something. They want to take action. So then it's thinking about what should they do. And the question, is this more of a critical reason tool than an ethical tool? I will leave that up to you to evaluate. I would say that ethical action is a key component of ethics education, and therefore is deeply, just very much part of ethics. But you can analyze it in different ways, and I welcome that. Now, I also received a question about how Ashesi instills ethics. Before I go on to that, I want to know, is there any follow-up to any of these questions? Is there anything maybe that people want to ask in addition, or something that was not clear in my answer before I get to talking about Ashesi?
I think it's okay. You can talk about session now.
Okay, so the question was about how Ashesi instills ethics in its students and in its university. I actually have a slide here that I dug up that I shared in a year ago with Cavendish. So is it possible for me to share my screen? Let me see. Yeah, and I hope that I share the right slide. So I'm going to go to share screen, and let's see, this it? This hopefully is the right one. So what we have at Ashesi, and I hope you're all seeing this now, is a multifaceted approach to teaching ethics. So in addition to giving voice to values, we have 4 leadership courses. I teach 3 of them, and they are focused on ethical leadership. We also have an honor code, and the students themselves, they vote to accept the honor code. So they're doing this willingly, and there is no need for invigilations of exams once they have signed the honor code, which they do during their 2nd year. There's also a social honor code that was recently added too, which includes other ethical conduct, not just related to handing in papers or taking exams. There's a student code of conduct, and it extends also, the ethical approach extends to conversations in the classroom and outside of the classroom. When I first started at Ashesi, I was so impressed when Patrick Awa did one of his town halls, and the students asked him really tough questions. They found challenges, they found problems with the food, they other concerns that they had, and he didn't seem fazed by it at all. He was just very welcoming of the ideas that they were sharing and being very responsive in trying to be as helpful as he could. And I just thought that's fantastic. These town halls are a way to put ethical action or to put ethics into practice. Students are also involved in community service. They're very active in internships, and within their majors, there are also real-world cases that can connect to. So that's an overview of ethics education in relation to Ashesi. I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you so much. Our time is up, and I want to take this same opportunity to invite our DVC academics. I hope you're still in here. Dr. Olive.
Dear participants from CEU and of course others from the broader education collaborative community, allow me on behalf of the participants to extend our heartfelt gratitude, first of all to you, the participants from all the corners who have joined us for this Giving Voice to Values webinar. Of course, it has been very enlightening, thought-provoking, and it could not have been possible without the dedication and expertise of our seasoned presenters. To our presenters, Mr. David Mutabanura, our executive director, whom we here at Cavendish, for those of you away from Cavendish, we fondly call him ED. It is not, it's our fond reference to him. Professor Leonard Bear and Professor Rosemary Nyaole Kura, thank you so very much for sharing your insights, your knowledge, and your passion for values-driven living, I would say. You have shown us the importance of ethical leadership, and your commitment to the cause is commendable. I remember Professor Rosemary telling us that she was able to find her voice. And the way she was sharing made you feel that if you've not yet done this course, then you're lost. You need to take up the course. She shared with us how it transformed the way that she responds to situations before. She used to quit when ethical dilemmas were presented, but now she faces them head on and she knows how to. Professor Leonard, thank you. You shared with us your experience in delivering the course and your evolving approach when handling colleagues who are faced with ethical challenges. You told us that all people who do unethical actions tend to justify them, but you told us how to change approach in order to reach out to them. And you also told us that when teaching the course, it is very important to listen patiently so that others can talk. Mr. Mutabanura, we thank you. You told us what ethics is all about. We have a clear meaning of ethics, and we know exactly what to do in order to integrate ethics into our institutions and to develop an ethical culture. Thank you very much. We acknowledge your invaluable contributions, and you have left us with actions that we have to take. You have told us about joining the Giving Voice to Values course. You did not tell us though whether it is free or paid. So we are looking forward to joining, but it would be good if you could clarify that. Can we just jump on and get on with it? And I would like to encourage all of us to carry forward the knowledge and experience we have gained today and put it into practice. Thank you very much to the organizers, Bernard, the HR, Lydia. Thank you so very much. And that's all thank you very much and have a great day.
I think before we leave, we need to take a group photo. Can you all turn your web cameras on so that we can take a picture, please? After that, then we shall leave. Please turn your cameras on.
Not a very good suggestion, but let us obey.
The good news we have.
Bernard.
I will be taking the photo in 3 seconds. So I'm going to count up to 3, and then you can all say cheese and I'll take it. Okay. But I can see most people have not turned on their cameras.
I'll guess.
So on the count of 1, 2, and 3, say cheese.
Cheers.
Okay, thank you very much. It's done.
Thank you. We'll meet again on Wednesday next week.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard, and everyone.
Thank you.